Starting a business can be overwhelming. You're juggling multiple roles: designer, marketer, logistics manager, all while bringing your vision to life. But for millions of businesses, Shopify is the ultimate partner. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. From household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Build a stunning online store with Shopify's ready-to-use templates. Boost content with AI-powered product descriptions, page headlines, and enhanced photography. Marketing is easy with built-in tools for email and social media campaigns. Plus, Shopify simplifies everything from inventory to shipping and returns. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try. Shopify.com/try.
Everybody, and welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. It's going to be another week here of interview, of analysis, of some diving into some great history books, and generally all the stuff that I tend to do here. I want to start the week by looking at something that I think is really, really seminal, really, really fundamental. That is happening pretty shortly. It's consequence of Gaza, and it's a consequence of Trump's ham-fisted attempts to strong-arm the rest of the world, sort of allies and adversaries. It's the consequence of the rising power of China. And the thing I'm going to talk about shows us a huge disruption in the last kind of at least 50, if not 80 years of functioning of the international system. There have been odd moments like this, but I think nothing quite this fundamental. So this comes from an article in the online newspaper Middle East Eye, a reputable and credible source of information about the Middle East. A newspaper that features as one of its columnists the brilliant UK journalist Peter Oborne, a man of immense integrity. And this article by the journalist Sondos Asem is, I said, it is of huge and world-reaching consequence. And the article tells us that Spain and Ireland are to join more than 20 states to declare concrete measures against Israel. Okay. This is largely unheard of. The Israeli state has been given massive protection at the United Nations since 1948 by America. There have been more United Nations resolutions, mainly about the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, post 1967, than there have been against any other member state of the UN. And if it wasn't for America's veto, most of these resolutions would have been passed. However, outside the United Nations, the story has always been very different. Um, Israel has, of course, had its enemies and states that have viewed it as a pariah. Arab states, for the most part. Um, but there hasn't so far been an international collective of states looking to force Israel to abide by international law or to apply kind of some form of sanction against Israel collectively. And that's what makes this really a kind of a very kind of intriguing development, really. And it's not simply just global South states. Spain and the Republic of Ireland, both EU members, have basically broken with um, EU policy, EU policy led by Ursula von der Leyen, and eagerly parroted by Scholz in Germany and Macron in France, and both Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak in Great Britain, has been um, exceedingly kind of lenient towards Israel, if not kind of actively collaborating in Israel's genocide through sending all the equipment that Israel needs. So the article reads, more than 20 countries are convening in Bogota, in Colombia, next week to declare concrete measures against Israel's violations of international law. The emergency summit is due to be held on the 15th to the 16th of July, and I'll see if I can dig out some more information when the actual summit happens. Co-hosted by the governments of Colombia and South Africa as co-chairs of the Hague Group, to coordinate diplomatic and legal action to counter what they described as a climate of impunity enabled by Israel and its powerful allies. Okay, so I'm going to dive a bit further into the article in a moment, but this is really worth just kind of pausing for a moment. Why have these things not happened before? Why have Israel's many crimes against the people, the Palestinian people, the Lebanese, the Syrians, so on and so forth, the Yemeni, why have we not reached this point before in the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years? And the answer really has to do with America's kind of hegemonic status at countries like Colombia or South Africa could be forced back in line in previous epochs. I mean, one thing that has made this this Hague conference more likely is the fact that previously, when Israel has always been given a kind of like a window of barbarity by the USA, and then that window is meant to close at some point before world opinion becomes too trenchant, and Israel enrages too many people. That's not happened in this case for a variety of reasons. But in this case, what has occurred is that Israel's genocide, a live streamed genocide, and a well articulated one, where senior Israeli politicians, diplomats, and military people have talked explicitly about wiping an entire people off the face of the earth, or removing them physically from Gaza and establishing them somewhere, perhaps in the Sinai Desert, making them the problem of Egypt or another Arab country. And this kind of overt, explicit, and prolonged genocide or crime against humanity is a thing that has really kind of exploded any argument that Israel might have, any sort of soft power justification that Israel might be able to make, and it's torn apart the kind of the operating system that previously used to exist of brief periods of violence, um, uh, followed by long periods of kind of less overt, less visible oppression. But also, America's power to intimidate has been rapidly curtailed, ironically, by Trump himself. I mean, if you threaten the rest of the world with tariffs, the rest of the world will either recognize that, well, he's going to sanction us anyway, put tariffs on us anyway, put economic levers on us anyway, or they start to view it, as Mao called it, a paper tiger, something not to be that scared of. And of course, one of the attendees at the conference will be China. And China offers the global south an out from American control. And this is the thing I think that has huge significant consequences and long-term implications. If one of the attendees is Namibia, a country that has its own legacy of colonialism or colonization, that has been violently economically disciplined in the post-war era by the IMF, that has its own journey towards development, that has, as all countries do, desires for improved living standards, health for its citizens, and all these kinds of things, and sees that as being now feasible through China and not remotely feasible through the United States of America. I mean, they would be right to think that, because the United States of America is simply the kind of the vanguard of a Western imperialism that actively seeks to keep Africa poor and exploitable. Now, the idea that China is some kind of entirely benign entity goes against everything that anybody really knows about the workings of states, and of course it's not. It has its own self-interest at heart. But deep in the heart of kind of Maoist thought, which is still a part of the operating of the Chinese state, is the idea of third world emancipation, of third world anti-colonial emancipation, and the kind of the mass movement of the third world poor, which really will overthrow colonialism. And Maoism is nothing if not an anti-colonial movement, anti-colonial ideology.
Starting a business can be overwhelming. You're juggling multiple roles: designer, marketer, logistics manager, all while bringing your vision to life. But for millions of businesses, Shopify is the ultimate partner. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. From household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Build a stunning online store with Shopify's ready-to-use templates. Boost content with AI-powered product descriptions, page headlines, and enhanced photography. Marketing is easy with built-in tools for email and social media campaigns. Plus, Shopify simplifies everything from inventory to shipping and returns. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try. Shopify.com/try.
look at the idea that states are self-interested entities, sort of very sort of sociopathic constructs, if we were to add human traits to them, and that the countries in question um, nothing seems to kind of make any sense. But obviously, we need a kind of a more nuanced way of understanding the workings of states, particularly states in the global south with legacies of colonialism. Otherwise, none of this makes any sense. The idea that international law should apply universally, and that Western countries have now done their very best to make sure it doesn't, is at the heart of what the Hague Group is all about. So I'm going to read a bit more from the article. The Hague Group is a bloc of currently 8 states launched on the 31st of January in the eponymous Dutch city with the stated goal of holding Israel accountable under international law. The Hague Group's formation in January marked a turning point in the global response to exceptionalism and a broader erosion of international law. Roland Lamola, South Africa's Minister for International Relations and Cooperation, told Middle East Eye. That same spirit will animate this Bogota conference, where the assembled states will send a clear message. No nation is above the law, and no crime will go unanswered. Together, we will work to introduce concrete legal, diplomatic, and economic measures that can urgently halt Israel's destruction of the Palestinians. So they're talking about some fairly kind of robust measures. What will actually happen remains to be seen. But the language there, the South African language there, seems to be, in large part, but fairly assertive that this will work. What it will mean for Israel and for Israeli civil society when a significant number of countries, and I'll read them to you here: Algeria, Bangladesh, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, China, Cuba, Djibouti, Honduras, Indonesia, Ireland, Lebanon, Malaysia, Namibia, Nicaragua, Oman, Portugal, Spain, Qatar, Turkey, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Uruguay and Palestine. Okay, some small countries there like Djibouti and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but countries all of which almost exclusively have a history of being colonized. But you have enormous countries like Indonesia and increasingly powerful countries, wealthy countries. Places like Malaysia, where living standards are improving, and there is a sort of, over time, as these countries become better off, there is a deviation from Western models and the destruction of Western soft power. Firstly, over Iraq 22 years ago, and now over Gaza, has left not just diplomats and politicians who have always known Britain, America, and their allies are utter cynics, but populations within civil society who, I think the answer to this is that there are populations and groups within civil society in Colombia, in Algeria, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, that are increasingly educated, that are assertive, that are connected to world affairs, and who, like most people around the world, form clear moral judgments about the world order and the number of murdered children they see on their televisions and on YouTube. The thing that I find striking is that this language was the language of Allied powers during the Second World War. Sort of towards the end, when the war, it looked like the war was won, and the crimes of the Nazis were becoming ever more clear. Only at the end of the war, the scope of it is kind of fully realised to populations, and then, as I've said on this podcast many times over, it's still it took decades really for the scope of the Holocaust to be fully realised and fully articulated. But that's a different conversation. But this kind of language of holding the perpetrators of crimes against humanity to account was a Western language. Not that this is exclusively the kind of thing that Western people think about. Far from it. At the early United Nations, these sorts of things were articulated by many different countries, not exclusively Western ones at all. But this is the kind of the rhetoric of the Western allies during the Second World War, and it's a rhetoric that has been clung on to in various guises throughout the post-war period, with ever increasing degrees of hypocrisy. But Gaza has burst the dam, and this meeting of the Hague countries is the beginnings, I think, of a transition away from the Western world as being the torchbearers for international law. It is very difficult for Western countries to take back that torch. Only the other day, the kind of the draft outline of Britain's Strategic Defence Review talked about British unilateralism, Britain deciding if it needs to go to war, then it just will do. Again, no doubt in violation of international law. I sincerely hope we don't, but there you go. So there's no sense that from amongst the British or the Americans that clawing back our claim to be upholders of international law at the moment is in any way important. I mean, part of Trumpism is the rejection of soft power, the idea that soft power, which is the kind of legal, diplomatic, and cultural expansion of power without the need to use economic or military levers. This has largely been kind of dumped by Trump, and much to his evidence of kind of Trump's ignorance and his folly and stupidity is the idea that setting some kind of moral example for the world is like for losers. Prior generations of equally cynical operators like John F. Kennedy were clever enough to present the United States of America as the world leader in kind of freedom and morality. This is obviously perhaps either viewed in Washington as kind of sort of weak and effeminate. So I don't put it past the current administration to view that as being sort of some kind of threat to modern American masculinity. But also, it might well be that as a multipolar world grows, the vision of the United States as this kind of leader of coalitions of the willing and the free just becomes kind of unsustainable anyway. So perhaps they've dumped that one as knowing that the jig is up. Who knows? What is clear is that this meeting would not have been possible without the rising power of China. The states like Honduras, states like Colombia, Bangladesh, now have the Chinese to look to if they feel that they are going to be at the kind of the business end of American wrath. They know that they can export to China. They know that they can be assisted by China in a variety of ways. They know that if Elon Musk cuts off Starlink, that there will be a Chinese satellite system that they can use. There are innumerable ways in which third world states are now insulated against American power, which is evidently declining. And Trump's cutting of aid to third world countries, Trump's tariffs have kind of accelerated that process. So this is just, I think, the first indication of a parallel system of world kind of legality and governance, where you can find coalitions of states, and I think this grouping will grow, who will take it upon themselves, perhaps outside of the United Nations, to sanction Israel. Whether they choose to do this to, say, Sudan, is a different question altogether. Whether they choose to do this to Russia for its invasion of Ukraine is a different question altogether, and one which, it'd be interesting to see what the answer is there. So here, I think, is a real kind of limitation to American soft and hard power, where you have groupings of states saying that Israel cannot operate with impunity any longer. Will they place arms embargoes on Israel? I think most of them probably already do. Will they pursue economic sanctions against Israel? Quite possibly. Will they threaten to arrest Israeli diplomats and military men and politicians who set foot on their territories? Quite possibly. Will they institute broader sanctions against travel for Israeli citizens to their countries? We shall see. But the fact that I think probably all of these things are on the table is really, really telling. And it shows us about key transitions in hard and soft power in the 21st century. So that's why I thought I'd mention it. Anyway, thanks very much. And I'll put a link to the article down below. And enjoy your Monday. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Take care. Bye-bye.